Hello, and welcome to the weekly voice chat of the Men's Humans Rights Discord server. We are the semi official server of the Men's Rights subreddit, and this week's topic is Stanford University under investigation for sex bias against men. Now, if you go to the text chat channel, I just posted the article. Obviously, you can't click it if you're watching this on YouTube, but it's in the description of the YouTube video. It's an article from Forbes, and as you can see, the title Stanford University under investigation for sex bias against men. We are going to go through that now, but do keep an eye on the Saturday Text channel. Many say it is as much of, if not more so, the main event than the voice chat. So let's take a look at this. This was encouraging for me because it's coming from the Department of Education, and they're taking it seriously enough to at least investigate. Now, whether or not it's a sham investigation and they're just doing this for appearance's sake, or whether it's a serious investigation remains to be seen, but at least they're publicly acknowledging it, which is something. So I'm going to post a screenshot from the article, and it reads the following. Stanford University is being investigated by the Department of Education's Office of Civil Rights for bias against men. According to the complaint filed with the ORC, the Civil Rights Office, the elite school offers several programs to support women and no equivalents for men. The Stanford Women's Programs are just the latest in a long list of university-based women's initiatives under fire for violating regulations that prohibit sex discrimination. So I'm going to show you, it explains a bit more in detail the specific allegations and institutions we're talking about at Stanford. If you scroll down to the third paragraph, the original claim against Stanford included complaints regarding 27 Stanford programs that Moore and Petskoff believe violated Title IX. This month, the Office of Civil Rights officially opened an investigation into 5 of these programs: Stanford Women in Business, Women in Stanford Law, Stanford Women in Design, Stanford Society of Women Engineers, and the Gavilan Provost Discretionary Fund. So some pretty major industries in these programs, and the Department of Education apparently found these complaints seriously enough to go ahead and open the investigation. Now, it should be important to remember that in the United States, women are not behind in education. Men are behind in education very significantly. It's a 60-40 ratio female to male. So for every 3 female students, there's only 2 male students. And yet men have less scholarships. We have less programs available, as you're seeing in this claim against Stanford. And boys face the education gap from a very young age. They face the grading gap, where boys are given lower grades for the same work. So this talk is probably going to evolve to talk about education in general. I want to show you a study. It's one of my favorite sources for this topic. It's from the MIT School of Economics, which pretty dang good source if you ask me. And this is a 60-page study that kind of proves very conclusively that when you control for all conceivable factors, there's a very clear gender bias against boys in education. Boys are given lower grades for the same work. Now, I want to see where this goes. Maybe it goes nowhere, but at least there's a Forbes article about it. At least the Department of Education is publicly acknowledging that these complaints exist, and they're taking it seriously enough to either investigate or pretend to investigate the claims, the complaints of discrimination against men. I'm going to make this on a personal note because this is not a political server in the sense that we are not left-leaning nor right-leaning. We have liberals and conservatives here. But I will say it's even more encouraging seeing this coming from the current Biden administration, which is certainly thus far would not be seen as a pro-male administration. And yet even this administration is taking these claims seriously enough so that this is now being investigated. How much the president has to do with the Department of Education's decisions, who knows? But that is kind of the story. So we are opening the floor now. Feel free to speak. If you have anything you want to say on this topic, or if something similar is happening in your school or in your country, we'd love to hear from you. So the floor is open.
Maybe over a week ago, I linked a study from my own country to our host, Blue Orange, regarding the same situation happening, well, on a different country. And it's quite interesting how men are being left behind by education. And not only that, how support mostly happens for women. There are countless scholarships targeted exclusively at women, which it's fine and dandy. I'm not against women's education. However, by leaving men behind, you're being unfair. The resources should be split either 50-50 or as close to 50-50 as possible to avoid any biases.
Can you remind me what country you were in again?
Costa Rica.
Oh, that's right, Costa Rica. I do remember that. Yeah, and it's just, to me, when you look at some of the laws and programs that some countries and some universities have, it's almost as if there's a concerted effort to hurt men's education. I did a video which I'll link on the education gap in Finland and the University of Helsinki in particular, how the Student Union of Helsinki officially declared themselves feminist. And the University of Helsinki, I forget what the ratio was, but it was a very bad ratio. I think it was close to 2-1. I think it was somewhere in the neighborhood of like 62% of the student body, 63% of the student body was female, which is now approaching a 2/3 majority. And they were more interested in, if you check the text channel, they were more interested in how women were behind. When men were significantly less likely to succeed and significantly less likely to be at the university, they felt the need to support the majority. The 62% majority is what they focused on. I mean, how do you justify?
Of course they did. They're 2/3 of the student body, and they have trained in victim complex that they've been had hammered into them for years of like feminist indoctrination. Of course, they're going to think, oh, we've got to deal with the women's issues. They don't even consider the men's issues.
Yeah. Okay, so here we go. I found it. It's 19,900 to 10,900. So basically 20,000 to 11,000 is the ratio.
It's interesting too, because like we're told, oh, feminism is about equality and it's not about, women being ahead of men. But then this school that's declaring itself feminist, is actively promoting having far more women in the student body.
And it starts young, the education gap. I remember an article saying that by age 6, boys already believe they're less intelligent than girls.
Believe they're less talented, you say?
Less intelligent.
Well, of course they do, because the cartoons say that, the TV says that, Simpsons says that, all their favourite shows say that, the teacher probably says that in very subtle ways, like saying that the boys aren't doing as good as the girls and things like that. It's not that subtle, to be honest.
So was anyone a part of the generation that got put on like ADHD meds in the early 2000s here?
Yes, very much so.
Yeah,
very
like,
much so.
The reason that was actually on a very, sexist pretense, is because a lot of boys, at that young age are more energetic. They got to go outside and play outside, all these sorts of things. They can't sit still in a chair for 8 hours a day, because they're developing as young boys. But they put an entire generation of young boys on Adderall.
Yep, I've said that very thing before. Actually, I've said that exact thing before. It's very true. I was a part of that generation. Know what Adderall is? Do Europeans and other people, do you guys know what Adderall is? You guys, it's not really big over there.
No, we don't use it. We let boys be boys.
So it's amphetamines, which, if it sounds similar to methamphetamines, it's basically a weaker version. It's chemically very similar to meth. And we would prescribe it to 6, 7, 8-year-olds. College students take it for exams. High school students take it for exams and SATs. Athletes use it. I mean, it's drugs. It is drugs. It comes from a doctor, but make no mistake, it is drugs. And very young children are given it every single day. I can only wonder if I had any psychological brain damage from it. I'll never know.
One of the drugs when I was a kid actually made me suicidal in the first grade, or at least it's what I'm told. I don't remember it very well. Kind of like a hazy period in my memory, but yeah. They gave it to first graders like candy is because they wanted to make boys sit down for 8 hours a day in a class.
It's interesting because I've just seen this chart saying that the longer you sit down, the less your brain activity you have.
Yeah.
So the more you're sitting down, the less you're like it was saying like sitting down for 20 minutes versus after walking for 20 minutes.
I mean, even today, I got to get out of my chair because I work an office job. I got to go out like every 2 hours and go for a walk or something like that. I don't, most of our brain matter is oriented towards motion control.
It's important to move. It's very important. But these schools, they cut down on playtime. They think that girls are the archetype that boys should aspire to, and it's frankly quite disgusting how they treat the boys, because the boys are active. This is the most active time of their lives, and they're being treated like scum for behaving the way that boys behave naturally.
Yeah, boys definitely get more heavily penalized like in early childhood and school. I mean, even into college, actually, if you really think about it, when it comes to like the grade gap.
Yeah, we treat it like we have these stereotypes of the stupid athlete and the smart boy who sits down all day and is quiet. And so we like, this is the old stereotype. The new stereotype is the girl who sits down all day and is quiet is the smart one, and all of the boys are Neanderthals. That's what we've got now. And that plays into teachers' marking as well, I'm sure. Teachers, it's known that teachers will give lower marks to boys for the same work and punish boys more severely for the same crimes, which the justice system does. We've got a lot of stats on this on our citation list at menarhuman.com/citations. And it's well worth looking through all of this stuff, especially if you're sending your child to school. In fact, if you've got a son and you've got a daughter, it's worth comparing their work as they go through the school system and seeing how the boy is marked differently to the girl. Because you likely will spot a pattern, and if they're only like a year apart or something, or even if they're like twins same year, that's the ideal. You'll notice that they probably have the same teachers as they go through, and teachers are probably giving them very different marks for what they do.
My son's probably an anomaly for school, to be honest with you. He's been in top sets for everything. And
for him,
done very well. So, he's either Oxford or Cambridge candidate.
That's really good. Though I am not sure I would advise going to a university at this point, or at least don't let them go without warning them.
Yeah, the problem is the career he wants to get into. He needs university degrees for, really. So
if it's like hard science engineering, he'll probably be okay. But if not, even if not, I would talk to him every week and ask him about what's going on there, and I would be very, very clear about the level of indoctrination that universities put on their students. I mean, yeah, it's very much pro-Marxist, pro-feminist, crazy gender ideologue stuff.
Yeah, he's going. Hopefully, he's going to go to university to do aerodynamics, mathematics, and all that sort of stuff. So he wants to go into Formula One and design Formula One cars.
He'll probably be okay then, but he will probably be forced into some sort of lecture about consent where the general takeaway is men are all evil rapists who can't control themselves.
Yeah, I know. I mean, just get back to the story for a second. I mean, it's quite interesting that OCR are looking into this in the States, and there's going to be some kind of investigation carried out. I think what they'll probably find is these people may have a point, but what they'll also say is there's not enough women in these particular streams of education, therefore the women-only courses are valid. I reckon that'll be the final finding of the investigation. Probably be wrong, but there we go.
Well, if it's OCR, we really should have Title IX in here. He would be able to tell you all about OCR, but my general gist of it is that OCR will string this out, quietly drop it later on, and won't return anyone's phone calls or emails.
Yeah, OCR is complicated to work with, especially right now. Because I was talking to Title IX recently, and he was talking about how it's so hard because he still's got one huge case that OCR themselves has told this school multiple times they've had violations, and is my understanding of it. And that's still draft, and then they're trying to drop like some other cases he's doing. And I know other people work in Title IX and they have the same complaints. Like, they're at the point that many of them believe that OCR is practically rejecting anything turned in by a man, any case. And they're refusing to give most cases case numbers and stuff. It's just absurd. Honestly, it's a surprise that this investigation's happening. It's actually a slight shock, considering how uncompliant. Uncompliant? Is that proper English? Incompliant? You get the point. That OCR is being at the current moment.
What makes me think
have said
keep an eye on it, because do I trust this investigation is going to be completely unbiased? No. And even if it is a good faith investigation, what if they face pressure and protest down the line? Would they bend to that pressure? Because if this story becomes big enough, there's going to be backlash.
And I think if anything, like, even if we don't trust the investigation, it's still something that can like start a conversation, about this. And maybe this case is so egregious that they had to take it up, and maybe that opens, has an opening for some change.
I think the real win here is it got in the newspapers.
However, there's an issue that it's undermining the whole men's rights organization, which is in a lot of countries, feminist organizations get government funding in order to assign people to pursue these kind of cases to make sure they reach a solution. However, men's rights gets no ink, gets no funding, and men have to take from their own time, have to go and volunteer their time, their effort, their energy in order to just try to make sure something that should be followed doesn't get derailed and buried.
Well, that's why I'm going to ask everyone, post this link on social media when we're finished with this. Either just the article itself or this video, but let's make this into a big story, because as Nine says, this could absolutely grow into a conversation, even if the case itself doesn't end up going anywhere. Getting people talking about this is so key, and it's going to be how men's rights begins to actually get progress is when people are talking about it with their friends, at work, at school, and people really analyze, well, wait a minute, why do people hate MRA so much? What are their beliefs even about? Because I thought they were all about hating women, but now they're talking about a case that seems to be pretty interesting. I didn't know that men were only 40% of college students. I didn't know that boys were facing a grading bias from the age of 6. I never knew that. Those are actually pretty valid points. How come feminists don't talk about it, etc.? That's how you start. That's how it started with me.
I mean, that's definitely a way we should go about it, is posting it all over. I would say another way, I'm not saying posting about it doesn't create change. It makes people talk, and when people talk, they start having to recognize stuff, and that is what starts change. But the other part of change is also actions. I'm gonna be honest, I am slightly versed in how OCR cases happen, but I'm not versed legally on how OCR works in terms of accountability and check and balance systems towards itself. But I think the best part that could maybe come out of this case is possibly an opening to find somewhere legally where OCR will finally be forced into a lawsuit or some kind of position where they need a check and balance system. Because the way they're getting away with not taking care of these cases is there is no check and balance system to OCR. There is no one holding them accountable. If this case found something and they tried to shush it up, it can be used as something that could be used to push them to either have to create some kind of, I don't know, review board maybe that they don't get to choose, or just something. So something to think about there. I know that doesn't sound like we can do much about that, but it's the idea of making sure we keep a close eye, and for those who want to, like, take notes to see where we could slide in. Where is the opportunity? Where are they gonna miss so we can just grab it and use
And
it
you're
to...
absolutely. Oh, sorry.
No, it's fine. I can't think of English right now, so go ahead.
I was going to say that you are absolutely right. Having a very public, very well documented paper trail of OCR showing bias and burying something just because it doesn't fit their narrative, it's going to hopefully wake some people up, because that's how I got started into men's rights.
Yeah, our friend Title 9 is very much on board with like cataloging lists of these OCR. I'm not sure if you'd call them violations or malpractice events or whatever, but essentially, like there are people creating ongoing lists of what OCR is doing. So eventually, hopefully, there'll be some sort of class action lawsuit or something similar.
I think that's what this is lining up to be, isn't it? It's a class action lawsuit. If things go well, as it were.
Well, let's hope so. Do you mean the thing against Stanford or the thing against OCR? Because I'm hoping the thing against OCR is one.
Or both, ideally.
Yeah, ideally. Yeah, it is interesting that they've gotten away with this for so long, to the point where 2/3 of students are female, and like men are being completely pushed out of universities.
Yeah,
But there will come a point where there are no men in universities, and people will then quite probably start to ask why. But it'll be a long road until that point.
yeah. The hope would be, to Mike's point, if the story with Stanford gets big enough and gets enough attention, then maybe students at other colleges in the country will start looking at their college and say, hey, my college does the same thing. There's this great program for female students, but it's not available for me. I pay the same tuition. I worked just as hard to get here. So that's how you can make one story become a national class action lawsuit, because I would be willing to bet that this is rampant throughout the country, throughout the world. Colleges that have more resources available to women than to the equal tuition paying men. And this could be a great start. Does anyone have any experience? Oh, go on, Mike.
I was going to say there was also that thing in York University a couple of years ago over here, where they basically stopped the International Men's Day stuff from happening, but they allowed it on International Women's Day.
Yeah, I remember that. It's probably even worse in the UK. I can't imagine Australia. But to that point, does anybody have any recollections or experiences of something like this happening at your school? Like men being discriminated or left out or not having a program available?
I mean, straight up at most universities. My own current
Oh yeah.
university, which is funny, 'cause the conversation that came up, there's a women's resource center and there's absolutely no resource center for men. And then if you go to the mental health center, there's so many options for women, and there's almost no option for men. I think there's one group for men. And they advertise it unbelievably poorly.
Yeah. I had an instance from university. So there was this women in physics kind of organization, and so they were doing this event, and they said, you get free lunch if you help set up the event, because it basically was relying on student volunteer work. So the sexist thing that they did, which it wasn't like a big deal, but it's still like, drove some people at the walls. Like, okay. So when they finished setting up the event by like 11 or so, they've promised free lunch. They basically told all the boys to basically fuck off, that, because like men are privileged, that they're out of like a free lunch, even though like they had spent like the last 4 hours helping them set up the event, like by moving chairs, tables, and all that sort of stuff. I wasn't a part of the event, but one of my friends like came and told me that. I was like, that's stupid. And also incredibly sexist.
What they should have done is they should have turned around and dismantled everything they'd set up.
Yeah. Yep.
That's what I
He
would
was
have done.
talking about that. He was talking about taking like a couple of chairs and just like putting them back after they had done that to like a lot of the guys who helped set up like women in like physics event. It was incredibly sexist. And the mental health thing
I
is
know.
true, because even at my university, I still remember that they had all these like special programs for women, like none of them for like guys.
Yeah, I know this is kind of dipping into next week's topic early, but it's so common that men are asked to do extra physical and manual labor, and it's just completely written off. Like, feminists always talk about women's unpaid labor, but men's unpaid labor is that when a job is physically demanding and or dangerous, it is expected that men do it, often without any compensation. Or
Oh
in
yeah,
this case, not
100%.
only for punishment, denial of food. I mean,
Yep.
Yeah, when I was in school, we had like women in engineering and stuff like that, and there was no, equivalent. And then I took a class about because I had to take it. It was some, women's sexuality studies class or whatever. And I think I was the only man in it. They really didn't want me sharing anything, or, if you had a perspective that wasn't in line with, whatever they were telling us was the truth, which was just, feminist stuff, that, that was going to hurt your grade.
At least in my case, I haven't got that much of a higher education, but I've faced the same thing. mostly at work. Companies such as IBM have groups for IBM Women in Tech, IBM LGBTQ, which, sure, I'm gay, I can join that. However, there's nothing that it's unbiased and for men. I did join that LGBTQ plus group in IBM, and it was still chock full of sexist, uh, let's not say anti-men, let's just say men were never even mentioned, unless it was as a subgroup of the LGBTQ, and they were accepted, never the central topic, and never straight men. So it did feel quite sexist.
That wouldn't happen by accident. Like it's not possible that you have all of these different things, but never once men get mentioned. Never once, unless it's specifically LGBTQ. Which, just so no one tries to twist this, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but you should not ignore general men's issues, because that's going to leave people out. It's exclusive. It's exclusive.
Ordinary men are an afterthought right now.
It's worse than that. It's not only that men are being ignored. These things feel like sinister. They feel malicious by design. They don't feel accidental. It feels like a conscious effort, a calculated effort to leave men out.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. I've noticed that kind of trend as well. Like I said, I think it's a war against ordinary men. You know, both the left and the right do this kinds of stuff.
Exactly, and that men's groups are not referred to as men's rights groups. We are often referred to as anti-females' rights, which we're not. Women deserve rights. We all deserve rights. We all deserve the same rights. I mean, sure, there are a few things that are not comparable, like women's health products, like for menstruation being freely available, which is something that I fully and wholeheartedly support. But what about men?
They say that if you're anti-feminist, then you're against equality because feminism is about equality. Our argument is that when you look at what feminist organizations actually say and do, that doesn't line up with equality. The claim that feminists fight for equality is flawed. It's not only flawed, it's blatantly wrong. It's untrue. It's a lie. So when we're anti-feminist, it's not that we're against equality, it's the opposite.
And that's the problem right there, because, you know, I think they've convinced people that feminism means equality. So people weren't really, you know, wanting them to be in check or whatever. And now, you know, we see what's happened where you let, you know, the feminist agenda kind of just go wild. Now we're seeing where they're putting in place programs like this where it's about, you know, women getting ahead.
The phrase I often say, women getting, is to get women ahead, rather than saying it's to get women equal.
Exactly, and they do a lot of, I'm not familiar with this phrase in English, false equivalence, that's the one, such as, at least in my country, to try and justify how having 2 women graduates for every single male graduate, it's not sexist, and women's organizations actually need even more funds. They went ahead and said, oh, however, even though women are the most graduates, that are still underrepresented in the workforce, which is not an equivalent. I mean, sure, if they are not fully represented on the workforce, I mean, it's because some of them might graduate and decide not to pursue the career they graduated from, or graduated and decided to become a stay-at-home mom, or of course, they weren't able to find a job in the field of in their field of study, which is something that needs to be looked into. But it doesn't mean that, oh, we are graduating 2 women for every man that graduates, and still we need even more women graduated, and with a limited occupancy, that just means less men.
Just posted something while you were talking. I just looked it up there about attitudes in the UK towards gender equality, and maybe this is sort of part of it. But I don't know if you guys want to have a look at those. Don't know if it's revealing as such, but you know, it's there. It's there. Mark, would you like me to read these out?
Please do.
Right, okay, so this is from Statista. Attitudes towards gender equality in Great Britain in 2019. So it's a couple of years out, but I think it's probably the most recent source that we've got. Giving men and equal rights, giving women equal rights to men has gone far enough. That's 29% of men said that surveyed, and 25% of women. Okay. Achieving equality between men and women is important to me personally. 55% of men and 68% of women. I define myself as a feminist. 29% men, 41% of women. A man who stays home to look after his children is less of a man. 14% of men and 12% of women. I'd feel uncomfortable if my boss was a woman. And that's 18% of men and 10% of women. I don't know what we can really glean from that, but that's a few statistics around attitudes towards gender equality, feminism, and everything else. I will say, on that last one, I do actually get really uncomfortable having a female boss, if I'm honest. I'd never really know how to behave with them. And they all tend to be a bit aggressive, the ones that I've had. I mean, particularly when I used to work in like fast food restaurants and stuff, they'd be absolutely horrible to deal with because you just say the wrong thing or what could be perceived as a wrong thing, and you get daggers and everything else. So yeah, and obviously you can see Go on.
I've had female bosses before, and I've had mostly good experiences. I would imagine the UK is probably worse than the States for that, because I would imagine that feminist-leaning people are more likely to be promoted, which is the case very much in Los Angeles too. So any progressive area, I think that's more likely to be true. And so if you're in a progressive environment, feminist-leaning, aka toxic-leaning, especially women, are probably more likely to be promoted. I saw that firsthand. In Florida, where you don't have such intense progressivism, I have had female bosses really without any problems.
Yeah, it really depends on the woman, to be honest, because like some of them like are just really bad leaders. But then again, I could say the same thing about men. You know, it just depends on the person.
I think it's definitely regionally relevant, though.
Yeah, I agree.
Like if
100%.
if you were on a very leftist campus, for example, I would imagine that certain kinds of beliefs are rewarded in terms of promotions and in terms of leadership positions, like the UK student council, student union rather, is so rabidly feminist. I mean, it's scary. And so, of course, they elect and promote their own people. And so it becomes this cycle where it's just constantly, where the place Mike was talking about where he had this terrible boss was probably hired by a similar boss who was probably hired by a similar boss, and the cycle just goes and goes and goes.
Yeah, I'm just looking.
Once they take,
Go on.
I was saying, once they take over, they tend to implant themselves.
Yeah, that's true enough. I'm just looking up best countries for women in US news. And so, to no surprise, really, you got Sweden at number 1, Norway number 2, Finland number 3, Denmark number 4, Switzerland number 5, Canada is number 6, number 7 is New Zealand, number 8 is Netherlands, 9 Australia, and 10 is Germany. I'm not going to continue going through. I mean, the UK comes in at 13, and
Where's the US?
number 19.
Yeah, I wonder if they would revise that now that Norway has gender equal conscription and women are conscripted too.
I can respect that.
This is the very latest. So this is literally 2022.
And that doesn't surprise me.
I was looking at something else as well, regards to education. See if I can find the link to change because that America was top, but I don't know if that's like education spending. Here we go. Top 5 countries for education. The time when information has increasingly become one of the world's most valued goods and services, education can serve as a strong indicator of a country's overall strength and standing. 2022's best countries for education rankings drawn from a global survey of more than 17,000 people. So what's the global population? About 8 billion. And they surveyed just over 17,000 people. Okie dokie then. How many do you want to bet were in the United States? So in terms of educational rankings, the United States comes in first, then the UK, Germany, and then it's Canada, France, Switzerland, Japan, Sweden, Australia, and the Netherlands.
And it's true if you're wealthy and you have access to the best universities, if you can afford to go to MIT, Harvard, Princeton, Caltech. But there's absolutely no way, if I'm a working class parent trying to put my child in university, does the US come anywhere near number 1. So yeah, I mean, the US healthcare system is the best in the world if you are wealthy and can write the checks. The education system is the best in the world if you are wealthy and can write the checks. But for the vast majority of people, not even close. Not even close. It's like the United States is very top heavy. Like our best of everything is the best, but then when you come to the middle percentiles, we are very much behind. Very large parts of the world, for sure. So it's a great place to be a billionaire, but where isn't?
Recruit difficulty.
But this is progress. I mean, the fact that the Department of Education is actually going public with this and actually investigating this, because it's now a story. And the thing is, even if it doesn't go anywhere, it has now become headline news on a reputable source. So you can always go back to this and say, well, the problem must have been bad enough that they decided to open an investigation. And if it gets shut down, if the investigations get shut down, if they stop doing it, we can look and see why. And we can see if feminist organizations were attacking it and were pressuring them to stop before even looking at all the data, and say, how can feminists support equality if they won't even allow an investigation to take place to get to the core of the matter, to get to the truth? They won't even support an investigation. There's a claim of discrimination. There's evidence of discrimination. There's an argument to be made by those being discriminated against, and feminists won't even allow their voices to be heard. They won't even allow the investigation to take place. So this is definitely a story to keep an eye on and to follow, because this could go somewhere. And even if it doesn't,
Yeah, continue to
So they
talk about
even-
it, spread awareness of it, all that sorts of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree there. Mar, out of interest, can I just cover the article I posted from the BBC? Because it's along the same sort of lines, although it's a completely different subject. If you're still there. Men are women. He's gone to sleep. In other words, he's gone to sleep.
I say just do it. Why not?
Yeah.
Why not? We're here. Why not?
Right, okay, so the BBC is reporting that for the first time ever, journalists are going to be allowed inside the family court system in the UK. Now, at the moment, it's only a year-long pilot scheme. It's going to be taking place in Leeds, Cardiff, and Carlisle. Cardiff being my closest one. Now, this has the potential, as the situation with Stanford University, to be an absolute slam dunk for men and men and fathers, because if the journalists are allowed to do their job properly, or are capable of doing their job properly, it will mean that we have documentary evidence of the abuses that men and fathers suffer in the family court system. So this is, again, like the thing with Stanford University, this is certainly something for us to be keeping an eye on and crossing our fingers over as well. Don't know if anyone's got any thoughts on it.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same thing. Wait and see. And you know that feminists will try and co-opt it, and you know that they will lie about the results if the results aren't to their favor. So we'll have to keep an eye on it, be vigilant, and wait and see.
Yeah, go ahead with that, Darkisha. It'd be interesting to hear the information.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, since we were talking about colleges, Gear had put an article about education in Costa Rica. The article's in Spanish, but just to translate it, so regardless whether a university is public or private, the female presence, as the article writes it, because translating to English, sorry, makes up 62% of graduates, while male presence only makes 38%, meaning just female, male. So graduating classes are 62% female, 38% male. 54% of enrollment into state university, well, what would be state universities? Yeah, state universities in US. And it's technically a translation of state, but in South Central America, we have it called more regions, but it's still the same idea as states would be in the US. As said, 54% of enrollment's female. And then it said that there's 278,000 people without work in general, and 153,000 of that is women, which means the remaining amount is male in Costa Rica. And
62% to
then
38% is a pretty dire ratio.
yeah. And then in the arts and in like English and writing and those kind of areas, 60% of it is female. Oh, the 54% was from 2017, but their most recent one for enrollment to what would be state universities in the US, which they're calling state universities here, it's now 69% are female. That's what the article's saying.
The way they get around all this
Sorry if that was a
stuff.
rough
No,
translation.
so the way they get around all of this stuff and having gender quotas for certain subjects is they're saying, well, there's not enough women in these particular subjects. I mean, they're not doing the inverse. They're not putting systems in place for getting men to get their helping men to get teaching degrees and all this sort of stuff, or into veterinary care or nursing or what have you. So they're only just getting away with it, but unfortunately enough people have bought the lie because the lie is believable at the end of the day. Doesn't matter how big of a lie it is. So yeah, I don't know if we want to knock it on the head, guys, and go to free talk.
Yeah, Katrina, do you want to take us out?
Yeah. This has been the Men Human Rights Discord server. This is our Saturday chat that we have every week at 1:30 p.m. Central, 2:30 p.m. Eastern, 7:30 UK time. We are here every week. We always love hearing what you guys have to say. Please, if you ever have topic ideas, you can message Ma, you can message Blue, you can even message Painter and myself. And we will see you guys next week.